These are the notes for section 2.5 part 2, and I'm actually going to be splitting this section, 2.5 into 3 parts, so these will be hopefully a little shorter than usual, and there'll be one more notes for section 2.5. So we're going to kind of continue what we were doing in 2.5 part 1, where we are finding equations of lines. Now, every time you find the equation of a line, you're going to be given some different instructions. In this case, or some different information. In this case, they're giving you 2 points that the line passes through. So you want to make sure, again, I think I mentioned this in the last video, write down some notes to yourself about what this question is asking, because then when you get similar questions on the homework or maybe on a test review, you can go back and find something that was similar and see what the process you used was. So you don't have to write down this whole question, but write down at least some of it so you know what it was asking and what it gave you. So it says, find the equation of the line in slope-intercept form that passes through the points -1, -5, and 3, -2. So if I were you, I would at least write down something like this. Find equation passes through, and then those 2 points I gave you. -1, -5, and 3, -2. That's the very minimum you should be writing down before we start this problem. So in an equation, in slope-intercept form, we need a slope and we need a y-intercept. So the first thing we're going to do here is find the slope. And we know how to do that given 2 points. We just need to find the change in y and the change in x. So I've got an x and a y value here and another x and y value here. So to find our change in y first, we're going to see how far is it to go from -5 up to -2. So that change in y is going up 3 or +3. Our change in x is going from -1 all the way up to +3. So our change in x is a +4. So our slope, which is change in y over change in x, some of you have been switching that up, make sure you put y on top, is +3 over +4. You don't need to put the plus signs, just 3 over 4. So we know our slope. Now we need to find the y-intercept. There's 2 different methods of going about this, and I'm going to show you both of them. So the first method that you can use, and you only have to use one of these, but go ahead and write them both down right now. The first method you can use is to use point-slope form. And if you remember point-slope form from our last notes, it looks like this. Y minus y1 equals our slope m times the quantity x minus x1. M is our slope, and x1, y1 is one of the points on our graph, anywhere on the line. So we know the slope, and we have 2 points to choose from for that x1 and y1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose that second point, 3, -2. I'm going to use that for my x1 and my y1 value. So let's plug in those 2 values along with our slope into this equation. So remember, this first y and the first x always stay there. So I've got y minus my y1, which is -2, equals our slope, which is 3/4, times x minus our x value of that point, which was 3. All right, so the thing is, the question doesn't want it in point-slope form. The question wants it in slope-intercept form. So what we need to do here is move this around so it's in slope-intercept form. The first thing I want to do is simplify this minus a negative. I know that's the same as y plus 2 equals 3/4 times x minus 3. Now, we're trying to get this y by itself. All right, this y right here. He wants to be all alone. I need to move that 2 away, but before we do that, let's go ahead and distribute the 3/4 on the other side, just because it will make it so that we can actually add that 2 to a term over there. Right now, we couldn't add 2 to any of those terms. So I'm going to distribute 3/4. So 3/4 times x is just 3/4 x. And 3/4 times negative 3, 3/4 times negative 3. Remember, we just multiply straight across. That's negative 9 over 4. Now, normally, you guys probably know, I don't really like mixed numbers very much. It's not that much use to us in algebra, but in this case, I know that I'm going to be subtracting that 2 because I have y plus 2 equals this. It's going to be way easier to subtract a 2 from either a decimal or a mixed number right here, because that's the term it's going to combine with. It can't combine with that x term. So I'm just going to rewrite this. But I'm going to change 9/4 into 2 and 1/4. Normally I don't like mixed numbers, but since I'm going to be subtracting 2, it's going to be easier to subtract it in my head if I can subtract it from negative 2 1/4. So let's subtract 2 from each side. And we are left with y equals 3/4 x. And then we've got negative 2 1/4 minus 2. So that's minus 4 1/4. And you can leave a mixed number here right now. It's minus 4.25. That's fine. So that's one way of getting that equation into slope-intercept form. Another way of getting that equation into slope-intercept form would be to use slope-intercept form from the first place. So I'm going to scroll back up and do that as a different method. So our second method is to use slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. And we talked about this in the notes yesterday. So remember that I know my slope already, right? My slope, my m is 3/4. So let's fill that in. Y equals 3/4 x plus b. I really want to know that b. I really want to know that y-intercept. In the first method, we found the y-intercept just by simplifying that point slope form. In this one, what we're going to have to do is plug in a point for my x and y value to be able to find that b. So I'm going to plug in that same point that I used before, 3, negative 2. Remember, that's the point that they gave us in the equation, or in the question, 3, negative 2. So I'm going to use that for my x and my y value here. So I'm going to rewrite this. Instead of y, I'm going to write negative 2 equals 3/4 x. So instead of x, I'm going to write 3, so times 3, plus b. I don't know my b yet, but I'll figure it out. I'll get it by itself now. So let's go ahead and multiply that 3/4 times 3. That's going to be 9/4 because 3 times 3 is 9. So I've got negative 2 equals 9/4 plus b. Now I just need to get that b by itself, so I just need to subtract 9/4. Remember, that's the same as 4 1/4. So I'm going to subtract 4 1/4 from each side. And I get the same thing I got in my last one. That means that b is, whoops, that's sorry, negative 2 1/4, right? Sorry. 9/4 is negative 2 1/4. So I'm subtracting 2 1/4 from each side. So we get b is negative 4 1/4 again. So now I can just kind of take this back up to this step. Now I can actually write that whole equation. I can write y equals 3/4 x minus 4 1/4. Alright, so I'm going to give you guys one to try. You don't have to use both methods. Just pick one of the methods and try and follow that same process. So here's your first one to try. Find the equation of the line in slope-intercept form that passes through the points 1, 3, and 2, negative 5. Pause this, work on that, and then I've got just one more example for us to do. Alright, so the last example we're going to do together, and I've got one more for you to do on your own. It says, find the equation of the horizontal line that passes through the point 1, negative 4, and then we're going to find the equation of the vertical line that passes through that same point. Go ahead and pause this right now if you need some more time to write down enough of that problem. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that point on a graph. I think it'd be easiest for this first example to visualize this. You're not always going to have to graph these though. So here's that point, 1, -4. So first I want the equation of the horizontal line that passes through that point. So I can easily draw that horizontal line here. And I hope you guys are making a graph in your book too. Now we know how to write the equation of a horizontal line, right? Do you remember hoi vux? So hoi means we just write y equals. So we hit that y-axis at -4. So I just write y equals -4. Now if you noticed, all I had to really do was look at the point and I just picked out the y value and I wrote y equals that. And that's the horizontal line. Now let's do the vertical line that passes through that point. So if I draw the vertical line that passes through right there, remember vertical is vux, so I'm just going to write x equals, and the x value here is 1, so I just write x equals 1. And again, notice that that's just the x value in that equation. So you can make this pretty easy and quick. You don't have to graph it every time. You can graph it if you need to, but I just want you to try one like this. I want you to find the equation of the horizontal line that passes through -5, 3, and then the vertical line that passes through the same point. And once you finish that, you are done with these notes. Come to class with any questions you have. We'll do lots of practice.